Okay. Proverbs 18. What do we think? Yeah? No? Meh? Looks like my son was here. This is his graffiti of the whiteboard. Okay, any initial reactions to Proverbs 18? Any verse that stands out to you? Anything kind of catching your eye? Nobody, huh?
Just words, focusing on a man's words to how we treat others or talk to others.
Yeah. I love that it's over and over and over all about words, but if you look closely, there's these little nuances. Our words are very, very powerful. Yeah, lots about words. Anything else? Yeah.
We thought that verse 21 was like the summary of the whole thing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it could be almost like it could be like the summary of everything Proverbs has to say about words, right? I had written down. Well, we'll get there in a second. Yeah, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Jimmy Reeves actually quotes that to me often when we talk and pray about our kids. Just remembering that, just flippant words that you say in frustration actually go really deep into a child's heart. To remember that. Anybody else have a verse that stands out to you, a theme, something that stuck with you? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Wanda, please.
I was sharing with the table here, verse number 13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. And sometimes it is we can start talking, thinking we know something, and we know nothing about whatever that person's going through or is happening. We speak before we hear what we know.
Yeah, I actually was telling this table beforehand, that was the verse that stuck with me the most because how many of you have had this happen before where you're speaking to someone and they're not listening to you, they're formulating what they're about to say as their comeback? How many of you love when people do that? It drives me nuts, but here's what drives me the most nuts about it. I get so angry inside that somebody would do that, but the reason I get so angry is not at them, it's at myself because I know that I do it too. You do the very thing that makes you so frustrated. I can't believe that person keeps interrupting me. I'm not even finished. And then the very next day you're talking to somebody and you're doing the same thing. And you go to bed at night and you're like, oh my gosh, God, thank you for your grace. Without it, I am a treading water about to drown person. So yeah, that's a really important one. That actually has the word that many of us know, Shema, in it. That's not just the word, I heard the words that you said out loud. It's I heard, I internalized, I understood what they mean, which is very different. I think it's the difference between listening and hearing, sometimes people will say. Anybody else have something that stands out? Okay, well, let's jump in. We'll tackle a few verses in a little bit more depth. We're going to tackle verse 1. Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. Greg was saying verse 1 is like the person who locks themselves in their room on their phone. Anybody want to do this exercise where we look up our screen time average? Anybody want to do that out loud? I have a major beef with iPhone because I listen to a lot of podcasts in the car or in my headphones while I'm doing dishes or whatever, and it counts it as screen time, which I think is cheating. Because it's in my pocket, I don't have it in my face. I'm doing something for real. I'm being productive. But then it'll be 5 hours of screen time. And I'm that's ridiculous. I looked at the screen 45 minutes today. I want to throw it against the wall. But I need to find somebody who can get my complaint to the highest levels. Okay, so whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. Let's talk about this idea of isolated. Some synonyms in Hebrew are... Some versions say the estranged one, the one who's cut off from contact with other people, the detached one, the misfit. I think the NIV calls it the unfriendly person. I don't think that means I don't want to be around you. It's literally they have unfriends, they don't have any friends. They're just a solo loner in the world. So a solo, isolated, estranged, detached person seeks his own desire. What does this mean? Maybe this could be the reason why they don't have friends, right? He breaks out against all sound judgment. You ever notice this word happens a lot throughout the scripture? Selfish ambition or vain conceit. You know these concepts? So when somebody is selfish and they're seeking their own ambition all the time, what's kind of like the byproduct of their life? Yeah, Lucas.
It would go against biblical wisdom.
What's that?
If taken to the nth degree, it would go against biblical wisdom in most settings.
Okay, so the opposite is like they're just foolish. Can you? I wrote this phrase down because we say it in English. These are the people who are just looking out for number one, right? I'm just going to write number one. So everything is seen through the lens of what can I get out of this situation, or what does this benefit me? And so any situation whatsoever that could be difficult or a challenge, or maybe it's a service opportunity that you get nothing out of in the short term, is automatically written off. And Proverbs says he breaks out against all sound judgment. I wrote these words. Practically, these are the people who are inconsiderate. These are hoarders. Self-aggrandizing, self-promoting, looking out for number one. The psychological world would say these are antisocial personality disorders. These are people who can't think of anything except themselves. They'll squeeze every cent they can. They'll wreck every friendship that doesn't benefit them. And they'll always cause strife among mature people who are trying to push them towards healthy Christian life. Verse 2. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion.
I was just thinking, we become fools when we become angry.
Oh, interesting. We become fools when we become angry.
Because when we're angry, we just want to express our opinion.
Yeah, and when you're angry, you lose all self-control over your own emotions. Lucas.
I think, too, there's a connection between isolating yourself and becoming more and more foolish the more that you isolate. Because the more that you're choosing to isolate, the more you're actually actively rejecting sound wisdom and what is laid forth as true wisdom.
I think it speaks to an element of wisdom, that wisdom is found. It's not like this secret thing that you find all alone in a dark room. It's something that has to be kind of iron sharpening iron. We have to do it together. There has to be input. There has to be pushback. There has to be critique. There has to be encouragement, which is why we're called to do it together. Yeah, Lisa.
I think there's a proverb that talks about wisdom comes with many counselors or something like that.
Yeah, I forget where that was. We did that one. It was probably 12, 13 maybe. I could go back and look. I have a full binder full. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, I remember what you're saying. Wisdom comes when there's like a whole bunch of counselors. Yeah, I think that was one of the proverbs to the king. Like, don't ask all the advisors you have that say things that maybe you don't like all the time. Don't surround yourself with yes men. Okay, so a fool takes no pleasure in understanding. So a fool does not listen to understand, but to form a response of his or her own opinion. So the only reason I'm listening to you is not because you have something to offer me, it's because I'm going to beat you in this argument. Anybody ever been part of this before? Anybody ever listened to talk radio before? This is kind of sometimes how it's set up, is like, we're going to take a call, and you realize every time they take a call, it's always like to be combative to someone. I wonder if they're screening the calls just for people that the host can like put on blast. Anybody ever watch news like YouTube clips? It's one of the worst things about our news is that everything comes in these like 5-minute interviews. They're like, now we go to so-and-so. Tell us everything we need to know about Israel-Palestine. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds, right? And it's like this quick like hitter 90-second, and then they get blasted, and they're like, well, that's it. We'll see you next time, right? So they have a host on. They're like, your opinion stinks. We don't like your opinion. We blast you, and now you got to go. And you were expected to answer this thing in 90 seconds. People are not listening to understand. They're listening to win. Expressing opinions in this fashion leads to the indication, I don't care what you have to say. What you have to say is just filling time before I get to tell you what is right and what is wrong. I think if I'm honest with myself, the time that I'm most tempted to do this is with a 5-year-old. Like, you want to jump right into correction mode because, of course, I know more than a 5-year-old, right? But there is an element, this is like one of the things I'm learning about being a young dad is like, wait a second. It's not so much that what he has to tell me is something I've never heard before or I'm going to learn. It's that I'm learning to sit and listen to how a 5-year-old processes. And you can see like, wow, he's listening to me. He loves to listen to what I have to say, even when he says what he says is totally wrong. For instance, he told me today that he was going to get married, but he wanted to let me know that he was going to use all of his money to go to Chuck E. Cheese every day. You know? So here's the chance to say, what a dumb idea. First of all, Chuck E. Cheese is terrible, and second of all, you're going to run out of money fast because it's a ripoff. Instead, I just said, oh, really, you are? Well, sometimes I might go to the trampoline park. That's what he told me. So,
I think there is like a power dynamic in that. You know, like you're the dad, he's the son, he's the boss, you're the understudy. And that dynamic can change, it can be fluid. One can not be a fool and one can be a fool. By having power and then not, and really they're a pretender and they are not really into understanding, they're just into expressing their opinions.
yeah.
So one can be the fool with power.
I see what you're saying. So sometimes you could be in a position, a fool could be in a position where they expect you to treat them as though they have wisdom because of their position, but they haven't actually earned it.
Yeah, they have no pleasure in understanding. They just care about their opinion. They just care about what they say.
Yeah, I think this is like the worst of all American bosses, and you see it in like Hollywood movies and stuff, is like the guy who knows nothing that expects everyone just to bow before his power or her power, right? How many of you have had this experience where maybe you recognize your limitations of wisdom? Like maybe your wisdom is in maybe your career field or something like that, and you have a conversation with somebody where you realize like, wow, they really respect my wisdom, but I also understand that they know things I have no idea about, and these are conversations that you usually leave feeling like, wow, that was very beneficial to both of us.
That's mutual respect, so that's not being a fool.
Yeah.
That's the opposite.
Yeah. So I think there's an element of foolishness that doesn't recognize, oh, I just hit my limitation. I actually don't know that. I just watched 3 5-minute clips on YouTube before this discussion, and I think I'm an expert.
Yeah, you stop on learning and more focus on giving your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. So it says that only expressing his opinion. I think I wrote this down. This is, I'm always the smartest person in every room, right? One version that I read this week says this is the person who is only will disclose whatever is on their mind with zero account of who the listener is. Everyone should be honored to hear what I have to say, is what the quotation is, right? I've seen this happen in youth ministry where sometimes you'll get an adult who's got like this crowd of high schoolers that are like glazed over and they're telling them about like all they know about like geopolitics, and the kid's like, I have trigonometry homework to get to, dude. Like I have no clue what you're saying. So zero account of the context of what you're talking about. Verse 13 says this, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. So listening is a skill that we have to learn over time. And this is where we got back to, I think Wanda had said it first. Is this the verse you pointed out, Wanda? Yeah, so this is the word, and some of you know this from Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So this comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's a very famous Hebrew prayer called the Shema. Shema in Hebrew usually gets translated as hear, but it's more than just hearing. When it's said in Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, it's that in order for me to know if you've really truly heard, it's that your life reflects that you understand and you've put it into practice. Does that sound familiar to anything else? Taking knowledge and putting it into practice is wisdom. It's chokmah, right? They're very, very similar concepts. So it says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. I think this is kind of what we're talking about, that genuine dialogue is kind of like this dance. It's a partnership of recognizing my limitations and your expertise or wisdom and back and forth, but also being wise enough to recognize this person doesn't know what they're talking about sometimes. So answering before hearing discounts what the other person has to contribute. Here's my question. What makes a good conversation? Have you ever heard this phrase that somebody is a good conversationalist? Have you heard that? What makes somebody a good conversationalist? Let's make a little list. Okay. Got to have somebody who you feel like is truly listening to you, or else this conversation is over quickly. Okay?
Ask questions based on the content.
Okay, so follow-ups. What do you mean by that? Nobody? Okay. Anything else?
And then refer back to when you have another conversation with that person next time.
Okay, so able to like reference other conversations, okay? Okay, so nonverbal cues. Knowledge, yeah, knowledge. Interesting. This nonverbal, I'll tell you a funny story. This is when I was in seminary, we didn't do a lot of like counseling stuff, but we did like 3 classes on pastoral counseling. But one of the like classic nonverbal cues is like, say a couple comes in, right? Is one of the strategies is you always let them sit first. I don't know if you've ever been to a counselor, but the counselor will always let you sit first. They'll never sit before you. So they'll let you sit first, and you'll see like on a sofa, for instance, maybe 3 cushions. The husband sits over here, the wife sits over here, and they both grab a pillow and put it on their lap. And they hold it like this, right? And there's a cushion in between them. Haven't said a word, have no idea what this is about, but what can you already begin to process? This isn't like, hooray, will you celebrate with us? We have this great thing going on. What is this? There's a problem, right? And I'm literally using a pillow non-verbally to like put up a shield between me, right? There's separation, there's distance. What's that?
Defensive.
Yeah, defensive. This is like not exactly nonverbal, but some interesting stuff. You may have heard children. There's all sorts of strategies to counsel with children. One of them is they draw pictures. They encourage you, hey, draw me a picture of what you do. And oftentimes what you'll find is like when a child doesn't feel heard, they'll draw pictures of like mom driving the car and they're in like the 4th row of a large van that mom and dad don't even own. And the idea is like she's way over there and I'm way back here. And they almost like draw out without knowing that there's distance, yeah. Knowledge or interesting. How about like just a topic that I'm curious about? Yeah? Just like, so this is kind of interesting. I wrote down a few other things. Curiosity. Like I really actually want to learn what you have to say. I would say this has been a challenging one to find in 2024, but feeling like you're safe to push back or disagree without the conversation ending. Does that resonate with anyone? I don't know how to write that. How would I write that? Maybe just safe to disagree. Anything else? Yeah.
You know, Andy, sometimes there's people that you talk to and they're yes-no people and nothing in between.
Oh,
Have you ever had somebody, I have a cousin that I don't see that often, and I'm going like, man, it's so good to see you. Have you been fishing? Yes. Have you caught anything? No. You know, but that kind of a thing, you know, and it's so hard to carry a conversation with someone like that you don't see very often, and he's your cousin.
yeah. So I'm just going to say X on yes and no. Like elaborates, right? So I think what's interesting about Proverbs is all this stuff is part of wisdom. These are the things that make us people. Now here's a compelling thought, is all of these things kind of added together. Is this a person you would want to talk to? What would it take for us to be people that people wanted to talk to? Because I feel like evangelism and sharing your faith, so often we think, oh, if I get the right formula and I get in the right place, it's just going to happen. I think for some people that could be true. For me in my life, the majority of the time I share my faith, it's usually in a relationship that's built, and this is our 3rd or 4th conversation. And you just feel, maybe you feel the Spirit kind of prompt you, like, yeah, say something about it. Sometimes I also catch myself not being this at all and realizing, man, you probably ruined a lot of pretty good opportunities. Okay, so this is what it takes to be a good conversationalist. Yeah.
On the one that Lynn was speaking of is that if you're a good conversationalist, you don't ask closed-end questions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You don't ask yes or no questions. That's like, does anybody follow NBA basketball in here? Just Cecil? Oh. There's a very famous coach, Greg Popovich. He coaches the Spurs. But he does this to young journalists. So journalists are taught, don't ever, ever, ever ask a yes or no question. You have to ask an open-ended question. That's how you get the information that turns into a statement that you can print in the newspaper. So he's kind of a jerk. So every time a reporter asks him a yes or no question, he pauses and looks at them awkwardly, and then he answers with one answer. Say, do you think you can do better in the second half? He goes, yes. And it's like, and you can tell they're shaking. They're like a 22-year-old intern. This is their big chance, and they just blew it. Okay, we got to move on. Verse 17 says this. The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. So now we're talking about listening. We were talking about using our words, how we listen. Now this is, I think, speaking to another angle of human nature, that we are, whether we like it or not, easily manipulated. We are easily manipulated. We're easily persuaded. We're easily convinced. And here's what it's saying. I think this is talking about what we would consider a court case. In ancient Israel, the disputes were heard at the city gate. The elders would gather and they would listen, right? Now, the first person to present their case has nothing that's come before it. They're not like arguing in response to something. So if you are the opening statement, what do you have as an advantage?
First impression.
You get the first impression. You get to frame the argument. You get to have all the time in the world. You're not responding to what someone else said. You have all open-ended time to come up with what you're going to say. So you speak in a convincing way. And what does Proverbs 18:17 point to? That if you're good at that, you can convince people on first listen. At first, the case seems right until the other comes and examines him. So with preparation and time on their side, people can convince us, and we're easily manipulated to believe certain things until we listen to the counter argument. Now here's the problem, I think. I think sometimes we hear this word all the time, that we are polarized people in 2024. There's very little middle ground. There's very little gray area in the world, politically, socially. There are far extremes on both ends. Does everybody agree with that? Now, one of the issues is that when we are that polarized, we are less likely to kind of venture towards the middle and at least hear people out well. So we could just always be feeding ourselves information that all it does is confirms what we already believe to be true. And when we do that, we just become more vicious and more dug in that the other side is wrong. All the while, we have not a real clue about what their arguments actually are. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's a principle I wrote down. When we don't do the hard work, we are more apt to not engage with people who might disagree or have serious questions, because we know we truly don't actually understand what they're saying or where they're coming from. A true rebuttal brings out deficiencies and reveals missing details. A couple ideas. How many of you watch true crime shows? Anybody like true crime? Nobody likes true crime documentaries? This is like the most watched genre in the world. Just Bo. Okay, so a lot of times these docu-series, it'll be like a 5-part series, right? And do they come out like, dun, 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 she went missing on a dark fall night. And then 10 minutes later, they're like, this is how we found the guy who did it. No, they got to fill 5 episodes. So what do? They show you all the dead ends. And so you're left thinking, is it that guy? Is it that guy? Is it that guy? And until you start to hear the pieces come back together, the picture of what actually happened is not clear. Are you tracking with me? So like, let me give you an example. I heard this true crime podcast a while back, and it was kind of doing this exact thing. So this woman, I think she was a teacher in Georgia in like the 80s. She went missing. She was murdered. And they were tracking down a lead, and they figured out which tire marks were in the mud. They tracked it back to this guy's house who had the exact kind of truck, all of the stuff. So you're thinking, this has got to be the guy, right? So they got on the stuff. It was a guy that fit his description. driving a truck that he actually owned, the same kind of truck, the same tire marks left in the mud, all of these calling cards that were him, right? And they're building it up, building it up, building it up, and then they tell you that he was like on a 3-week vacation and he was photographed like 3,000 miles away when it happened. And you're like, oh, if I hadn't heard that piece, I would have been all in, yeah, that guy did it, for sure. And then you hear the other side, and almost immediately everything you just heard is wrong. And now that I've heard the other side, I realize that we got to keep doing the research. So I think here's the ancient wisdom nugget, that we're not to come to conclusions on things until we've heard the best arguments on both sides. And sometimes that means sitting through things that you're hearing, oh, this is really your best argument? That's all you got? Sometimes that's reality. Sometimes it's, oh, I never considered that. I've always been told X, Y, and Z. I didn't know that that was true, or I have never heard this research. Could you send it to me so I could read it? I had no idea. So here's our question. Discuss some of the common reasons we are susceptible to being manipulated or believe certain things or to accept simple, unnuanced arguments. The unnuanced part is this. It's the CNN, it's the Fox News. Now we go to an expert on the Palestine-Israel war, and they're going to tell us in 2 minutes what everyone needs to know. So you're telling me a war that's been waging for thousands of years on ground that's been fought over for thousands of years in religions that have existed 3 times longer minimum than our country has even been around. Some guy's going to tell me everything I need to know in 2 minutes, right? That's the unnuanced. So how can we intentionally and wisely navigate a world of information to come to wise conclusions? How do we recognize and accept that we've been led astray and reverse course? So this is kind of a big open-ended question. That's the point of open-ended questions. No yes or no's. Ready, go. Okay, let's just really quickly, we'll do what we do best around here, and that's make lists. Okay, so how about this? I toyed around with it. I think this might be good. We're going to do 2 columns. This is the why we get led astray column, and then we'll pause after every person's thought, and then we'll talk about, like, what do you do about it? And I got to tell you, I think the right answer, if you want to flip to the back and see the answer key upside down in your math textbook, is a lot of the what do you do about it is going to be the same stuff over and over. But so why are we led astray? Somebody just kick us off. Gullibility.
Credible source. We think they're credible.
Credible, yep.
Uneducated,
Uninformed.
uninformed,
Isolation. Greg, can I share the phrase that you used? Greg used the phrase information ghetto. So often you get 2 people who disagree, and they're actually operating out of very different information sets. So I'm going to write it, and I'll tell you my example of this. I did this with my father-in-law about a year ago. This is what we would do. I can't remember which political issue we were tracking, but we would do the button where you go previous on the TV back and forth. And so we were watching, I can't remember what big news it was. It was some breaking news. And we would watch Fox News. And then at the first commercial, we would push previous, and we would flip over to CNN. And they were covering the exact same issue. And it became apparent within 20 minutes that if you were just watching one of these, you were getting very, very, very different information. And it was very clear to me that if there's 2 people watching each, and they go to work tomorrow, they're both going to think the other person is a complete uninformed idiot that doesn't know what they're talking about. I have all the information because I watched the news last night. And the other person's going to say, well, I watched the news last night, right? What would it be like to compile all of it and then have like a healthy conversation? So the information ghetto is I'm stuck over here, and this is the only information I get. I don't get the same information as you get. I said this, sometimes charismatic personalities. Yeah. Here's my example. About 10, 12 years ago, I right about the time YouTube was like very pervasive, you could just jump on and find anything, not just like cats falling in toilet videos, which was like how it started, I would start watching people say, oh, you got to watch this sermon. So I would click on it and I would watch. And how many of you have had this experience where you get really drawn into someone who's like just a really good speaker? They're just a great speaker. But then you pause and you start listening and you just think, this guy has said nothing in the last 30 minutes that somebody who's been a Christian for 6 months wouldn't already know. And they're getting standing ovations and all this stuff, and you're just thinking, I think that we're beyond the content and now we're at the personality is what we're standing on. Anything else? That's a good start, yeah.
I don't know how to put it in one word, but people tend to hear what they already want to hear.
Yeah, confirmation bias, I think is the word. This is, I already know what I know, and then when you're like a credible person saying the same thing, I'm like, yeah, we're on the same team. Yeah. Have you ever noticed with this confirmation thing that sometimes, even in a church circle, people will name drop somebody they listen to on the radio, and it's almost like they're throwing a lure out there to see if you'll bite it, like, oh yeah, okay, cool, we're on the same team, let's talk. You ever notice how people do that on like contentious issues? Like, hey, I was listening to this sermon, have you ever heard of, they fill in the blank, and someone's like, oh yeah, I've listened to them, and they're like, oh cool, we're on the same team, let's talk. That happens quite a bit, unfortunately. Anything else? Oh, yeah. So we're led astray because of selfishness or negative motivations. Okay, so we've got a good list going. Oh,
Sometimes you can be convinced when part of it is correct, but then you find one thing that they say wrong, and it's like, well, they're not really credible anymore.
what is that fallacy called? There's a fallacy where like someone could say 90% true, but the one thing they say that's factually incorrect, you're just like they're dumb. They're not worth listening to at all. I know what you're talking about. I'm going to say like partially. Okay. Okay. So what do we do about it? Turn off. I heard this comedian that was like, there was a news network telling people that they should stop doing their own research. And his comedic bit was, stop doing your own research. In my day, we used to call that reading. Okay, so do your research. Okay, what else? Because you could do your research and still come to a conclusion that's not complete, right? We were talking about how the algorithm, like on YouTube, for instance, you watch one video, and the algorithm's like, I think this person likes conservative news media. Let's push more of that. Oh, he clicked it twice. I think he likes even more conservative news media. And before you knew it, you couldn't even find a source opposite of what you naturally want to hear if you like went looking for it.
Non-biased research.
Okay, non-bias, yeah. As close to non-bias as you can get, for sure. I think we're missing the whole point of Proverbs here, friends.
So 17 says, when he states his case, first seems right until the other comes and examines him. So elaborating on the research, you have to research both sides, right? Yeah. No matter how you feel. And don't listen to fact check because they're biased.
Who's the dude that speaks like an auctioneer, that his thing is facts don't care about your feelings? Who's that guy? The Jewish guy. He talks really fast. No, not Dennis Prager. Yeah, the younger guy. Yeah, Ben Shapiro. There it is, yeah. Somebody, when I first heard that guy's voice, I was checking my YouTube, like, oh, I think I got on like 2x speed. And I realized, nope, that's just, wow. If he ever went out of news business, he should start an auction house. Anything else?
Pray.
Oh, there we go. There's a good one. Hey, there's two options. One is like being wholesale given to me, like this is the way, but I feel like there's something off and I don't know what. I've done my research. I still feel uneasy about it. Prayer is a good start.
Listening to elders, because they've lived a lot longer than we have, and they have more information.
Like seeking
How about God's Word? It's remarkable to me how many things that are being sold in our culture that are blatantly like you could just read 2 pages of the Bible, and I'm fairly confident it would just tell you like half of it is just like not for you. Yeah, very interesting. I like to turn off the TV. I just heard of a couple here at the church that they got rid of internet. They just decided we have phone data if we need to Google something. Otherwise, the only reason we have it is for streaming things, and let's get rid of all the screens. So I don't know if this is true, but I was told secondhand that they moved a TV into the garage and they pull it out once a month for a special movie night with their kids. Otherwise, there's no screens. There's not even an internet connection. Which I was like, huh? I think they have 2 or 3, and they're all under 5. Which I just thought, wow, that's crazy. How could you? Oh, maybe you could do that. Maybe you could pull that off. All good stuff. Okay, for the sake of time, we are going to talk about another nuance of life and death is in the tongue, and then we'll end with one more discussion question. So, verse 4 says this: "The words of a man or woman's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook." I was doing my non-biased research on this particular one. Thank you for the pity laughs. Deep waters and a bubbling brook. I guess I didn't even think about it kind of contextually, but if you were an ancient Israelite, both of those things would have been very, very desirable for you. Deep water is not just like, oh, cool, you could dive in the deep end, don't dive in the shallow end. It's not that. It's that deep water is a lot of water. In the ancient world, in a dry climate, a lot of water is a very important thing. A babbling or bubbling brook means, what is the bubbling about? It's fresh, and it's coming out of a spring, presumably, because the bubbling, that means it has a source. It's constantly flowing. So these are 2 images that are like very important in the ancient world. So it says this: "The words of a man's mouth, presumably a wise man, are deep water." The thing that you need for life in abundance. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. It's connected to a continual source for refreshment and insight because it's flowing. It's plentiful in nature. I wrote this little ancient wisdom nugget. This is what I write in my notes if you want to know my nerdy phraseology, but I always write ancient wisdom nugget for me. When we're connected to God, He aligns our hearts and minds to love sitting and listening to wise people share with us. How many of you know somebody that, that is a wise person? Maybe not on every topic, but when it comes to spiritual things, like, hey, that is somebody I would consult on just about anything spiritual. Before I make a giant spiritual decision, that is a phone call I'll make. Do you have those people in your life? I think this is what it's saying, is those people are constant refreshment. It just seems like they never run out of wisdom. And you know why it seems like they don't run out? Because they don't. Because they're connected to a source that doesn't run out. I wrote this down from Luke 6. I think this is in your outline. "The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks." Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Verse 21 says this: "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits." I think if we start backwards, the eating its fruits is kind of this, that whether you use the tongue to speak life or death will determine which fruit you eat. You ever notice that somebody who speaks behind other people's back, maybe is gossipy, maybe always talking about dark or depressing things, also lives kind of a dark and depressing life? Do you think that the 2 are related? Have you ever noticed like the constant optimist? Even sometimes there are people that in my life I'm like, oh my gosh, this person's driving me crazy. They're just hopeful all the time. But then over a long period of time you realize, wow, The reason they're hopeful all the time is because they're connected to the source of hope. They can find a glimmer of light in every dark situation. That's actually a person you want around. Go Niners. Yeah, we've been through some dark days, brother. Been through some dark days. There's a lot of light right now. It's easy to see the light. I'll tell you about it afterwards if you want. So this is what I wrote down. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. True or false? False. What is the sentiment? Why do we say that to kids? Yeah, it doesn't matter what anyone says. Just brush it off. How many of you know that you've tried to do that and there are certain things that have been said to you that either have never been brushed off or they took a long time to be brushed off? Maybe somebody hit like right in the soft spot or your biggest insecurity, like right on the nose, they got you. And it just cut right to your heart. You were like just devastated inside. I think that we say that with good intention. The intention being that don't let just somebody's words that they can just say out loud deter you from being the best version of yourself or something that our culture likes to say. But in reality, words really do hurt. They really can cut people down. And I've learned that I think the younger the child, the more that you can build them up and the more you can cut them down with your words. This is not necessarily like biblically rooted, but I would say there's something in the innocence of a child where you can see these things at their great extremes. You could say just a simple word about like, wow, you're really good at shooting a basketball. You could see a kid standing tall, I am. Or you could say something mean, even as a joke that maybe adults would say jokingly, and it devastates a kid. So those who recognize how powerful the tongue is hold a great and mighty power, says Proverbs, and they get to eat the fruit that it produces. What were you going to say, Isaac?
Just like the words that we speak this whole time, we're talking about that, but also it's about, it also could be what you write, a text message or an email, or just, that's another form of words.
Yeah.
That also is hurtful, or on social media or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I would say in some ways social media can be even worse, right? Because you're broadcasting it to an enormous audience. We've seen the devastation of like teen suicide because of what somebody's posted on the internet. Yeah, that is a wicked, wicked tool. To continue the nuance about words, let's look at verses 6 and 7, and then we'll end with one. A fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to the soul. This is that a fool knows how to use words to get punched, right? This is the say it to my face person that's still willing to say it to your face. I stumbled upon some videos somebody sent me. I won't say his name because he used to go to church here, but he really likes these videos where you find these like UFC or MMA fighters or professional boxers. You know, sometimes these guys like fight in a weight class. Say they're fighting in like the 120-pound weight class. So if you saw them on the street, what would your impression be? So there's this whole series of videos, and they have millions and millions of views. It's like a 120-pound guy, and you know, because you're the viewer, that he's actually the UFC champion of the world. He is the gnarliest 120-pound guy you've ever seen. But he's outside of a nightclub, and some 250-pound guy shoves him up against the wall and starts calling him names. And then why does everybody want to watch it? Because the fool has run his mouth, and now he gets what's coming to him, and he gets the embarrassment of being beat up by a guy half his size. Half of you are going to go look that up as soon as it's over, and you're going to contribute to the view count. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to jump down to verse 10 and 11, and then we're going to end with a question. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous man runs into it and is safe. The theme of these two verses is security and where you find it. So here's the idea. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. It's not like some enchantment or some spell that you just speak out the name of the Lord. The name of the Lord is a phrase that encompasses God's character, God's history, who God is, and what God is all about. It's not just saying his name and magically poof. It's to remember that, oh, he's the God of hope in dark places. He's the God of strength when I feel weak. He's the God who always provides. He's all of these things even when I don't feel it. So the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The tower was always at the center or built into the wall of a fortified city. So the idea is I can run behind the fortification. There's safety behind the fortification, but he is the tower. He is the safest point of all, where you can have the vantage point to see all that surrounds you. And the righteous man runs into it and is safe. So where is Proverbs saying that we find our security? In the Lord. The next verse says this, I love it. A rich man's wealth is his strong city. So what is his city? It's not the Lord's wall, it's his money. And like a high wall in his imagination. So when things get tough, I'm going to retreat into my stuff. And I have a lot of stuff, and it's a very high protective wall, ... in my imagination. I was reading a commentary this week, and I think it might be in your outline. It says this, wealth does afford a measure of protection. But the danger of wealth is precisely that it gives its possessor the illusion of greater security than it can ever provide. I was listening to a sermon on Proverbs 18, and the guy was saying, ghetto housing projects and mansions on the beach, when they catch on fire, they burn down exactly the same. That there is an illusion that somehow I can guard myself from all of these things, but at the end of the day, it's all an illusion. It can't protect you. So here's our question. There's an ever-present temptation to insulate and protect ourselves by accumulating stuff. How does this influence our ideas of success, our desires for our futures, and so on? And then how do we live as kingdom-minded people who trust in the Lord as our strong tower and fight back against the cultural value of making wealth our strong city? How many of you know that one of the greatest values of our entire culture is that you are an individual capable of creating your own empire? If you just work hard enough, you can hide behind the security of it all. You will be protected forever, and you don't have to worry about anything. This is literally at the core the exact same temptation that Satan said in the garden. You can be like God. You don't need him to protect you. You could be like him and protect yourself. So that is the question. There's a bonus there. Why don't you take 10 minutes or so, and then we'll regather and we'll pray together as we wrap up. Okay, we're going to wrap up for the night. As always, you're welcome to linger and hang. There is a lot of extra treats back there. They came from Pandora in the circle, if you like Pandora. Please take one. Take one to go if you'd like. I also sent a text message to the kids and the teenagers, so in about 2 minutes, they're going to go get them. So I recommend upon amen that if you want one, you head back there to get one. But let me pray over you, and then you can linger, you can hang, or you can go if you need to. God, thank you for your word, and thank you even for the evidence of laughter and joy and deep conversation that your word is alive, and it can become alive in us when we really take the time. And so, God, we rally around your word. We ask that you would continue to grow wisdom in us, that those seeds that are planted would continue to grow and grow and grow. So God, give us every opportunity to put wisdom into action. Would you give us conversations in our workplace? Would you challenge us with maybe a view that we've never entertained before? Not that we would give in to the truth, but that we would engage people for what the truth is. God, we believe that you are the author and perfecter of all things that are true. And so God, as we pursue it, I pray that we would see you in ways, notice you in places that we've never noticed you before. So would you go before us? Would you remind us of our identities in you, that we're secure in you in every situation that feels insecure, that feels uncomfortable, that we are safe, we are secure in you, and we retreat to you. So we love you. We're thankful for this time. We're thankful we get to do it together. Amen. Amen.